You're listening to the Author Stories Podcast, bringing you the story behind the stories and the storytellers.
Margaret White,
Terry Brooks,
Sheena Kamal,
Matthew Quick,
JT Ellison,
Walt D. Williams,
Brad Ford,
Corey Dr. O,
Brandon Sanderson,
Robin Mock,
Ernest Klein, Jim Butcher,
Charlene Harris.
Visit hankgarner.com for archives of all the shows. Today's guest is Rysa Walker and Daniel Arthur Smith. Welcome to episode 227 of the Author Stories Podcast. Today's episode is a special Oceans the Anthology episode featuring my friends Rysa Walker and Daniel Arthur Smith. Go over to hankgarner.com and subscribe to the show if you would. There are handy links in the sidebar where you can find the show in iTunes and Google Play and Stitcher Radio and YouTube and everywhere that you listen to podcasts. I found myself trying to dig through the archives the other day and realized that I could make the process a little bit easier for everyone. If you'll look in the right-hand sidebar at hankgarner.com, you'll see a handy drop-down box that lists all 227 episodes so far. Just scroll through, and at a quick glance, you can find the show that you're looking for. I think you'll find it quite handy. I know I did. Follow us on social media, if you would. On Instagram, it's Author Stories Podcast. On Twitter, I'm Hank the Writer. And join our booming Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/Author Stories Podcast. We've got over 1,000 members there, and there's always something fun going on. Thank you very much to our sponsors today, Pico's House. Authors, if you are looking to take your book to the next level and make it a standout in today's market, you really need to talk to my friend Crystal Pico Watanabe from Pico's House. That's Pickoshouse. She offers developmental editing, line editing, beta reading, and proofreading, and all sorts of stuff. Everything that an author needs to get going, Crystal offers for you. She has edited over 70 novels and novellas and 130 short stories, and she comes recommended by best-selling authors such as Hugh Howey and Samuel Peralta. She is a phenomenal editor, and she will help you make your book the very best it can be. Go visit her at picoshouse.com and let her know that you heard about it on Author Stories. Retrograde, the new book by Peter Cardron. The international team at the Mars Endeavour colony is prepared for every eventuality except one. What happens when disaster strikes Earth? Mankind has long dreamed of reaching out to live on other planets, and with the establishment of the Mars Endeavour colony, the dream has become reality. The fledgling colony consists of 120 scientists, astronauts, medical staff, and engineers buried deep underground. They're protected from the harsh radiation that sterilizes the surface of the planet. The colony is prepared for every eventuality except one. What happens when disaster strikes Earth? Peter was on the show last week talking about this phenomenal book. You're going to love it. Retrograde by Peter Cardron. The Paragons Trilogy by C. Stephen Manley. When dark portals open, heroes will awaken. Part science fiction horror thriller, part superhero novel, Awakened. Paragons Book 1 is the first novel in a trilogy series that provides a gripping origin story filled with mystery, fast-paced action, horrific monsters, and fringe science. If you enjoy a thriller novel with a heavy dose of the fantastic, you'll love Awakened. Buy the entire Paragons Trilogy, available now. Book 1 Awakened, Book 2 Conduit, and Book 3 Unveiled. This Thrill-A-Minute series will leave you out of breath and thinking hard about what you read. Link in the show notes. Buy the superhuman thriller series today. Fan favorite, The Ember War Saga by Dragon Award winner Richard Fox. This 9-book series is action-packed military sci-fi at its very best. In the near future, an alien probe arrives on Earth with a pivotal mission: determine if humanity has what it takes to survive the impending invasion by a merciless armada. The probe discovers Mark, a young inventor who holds the key to a daring gambit that could save a fraction of Earth's population. Humanity's only chance lies with Mark's ability to keep a terrible secret and engineer the planet down the narrow path to survival. Earth will need a fleet, one with a hidden purpose, one strong enough to fight a battle against annihilation. The Ember War is an epic military sci-fi series. If you like A Hymn Before Battle by John Ringo and The Last Starship by Von Heppner, then you'll love this explosive adventure with constant thrills and high stakes from cover to cover. Tears of Heaven, Flames, Perdition, Book 1 by R.A. McCandless. A child of angels and humans, Dell is a sarcastic, fast-talking, dangerous, and unpredictable demon hunter. She and her partner take their orders directly from an angel. They obey, or they'll be destroyed. It's not the job Dell wants, but it's the job she has. If you're a fan of paranormal, urban fantasy like the Dresden Files, you're going to love this book. I love it. I know you will too. Third Scribe is a place for authors and readers to unite. Authors, if you need a place to showcase your work, Third Scribe is the service for you. What sets Third Scribe apart is their unflinching dedication to service and support. With the release of its 4.0 revision, you get a cutting-edge experience that will set your work apart. Visit thirdscribe.com today. And thanks to Nick Breaker and Paul E. Hicks for their Galactic Satori Chronicles series. Book 1 Earth and Book 2 Chron are out now. Adventure sci-fi that you're going to love. Go pick it up today, Galactic Satori Chronicles. Stay tuned after the show for an audiobook clip from Richard Gleaves' The Jason Crane series, and look for my 3rd annual Halloween special with Richard coming the end of October. It's sure to be full of spooky goodness that you've come to expect from Richard Gleaves. Before we get into our interview today, let me highlight some notable new book releases to watch for this week of September 26th. Paradox Bound by Peter Clines, Neverwhere the Illustrated Edition by Neil Gaiman, Doctor Who, Now We Are 600 by James Goss, An Unkindness of Magicians by Kat Howard, Sleeping Beauties by Owen and Stephen King, Provenance by Anne Leckie, Star Trek Discovery by David Mack, The Hunt by Chloe Neal, The Eternity War Pariah by James Sawyer, Horizon by Fran Wild. Some notable new releases for this week, and let us know what you're reading now. On to our interview. Well, thanks for joining me again for the Author Stories podcast, where I bring you the story behind the stories and the storytellers. Today, I'm very excited to have two of my favorite writer friends on the show with me. Daniel Arthur Smith and Rysa Walker join me today to talk about this very special book that launches today called Oceans, the Anthology. It's Frontiers of Speculative Fiction, book number 2. Welcome to the show, Daniel and Rysa.
Oh, thanks, Hank.
So, we typically open with the, your first memory of wanting to be a writer question, but both of you guys have been on before. So, I think what I want to dig into before we really peel back the covers of Oceans, the Anthology, is why don't you guys give us a little update on what's going on with you now? Daniel Arthur Smith is, of course, no stranger to the show. He is the curator of Tales from the Canyons of the Damned, also the Clones Anthology that was out last year. He also was one of the authors in Dominion Rising, which had a huge launch just a few weeks ago, and his novel Spectral Shift was a part of that. Daniel, welcome to the show, and it's been a little while since we've chatted. What's going on with you these days?
Well, we're preparing for the launch of Oceans, of course, which is going on today, and it's been very exciting. We have a great roster with this project, but apart from the anthologies, I'm writing everything in the spectral worlds. The new novel is going to be coming out this fall when Spectral Shift is released as an ebook separate from the Dominion Rising set, and I think readers are going to be surprised and excited to see what we've done with the world. The entire mythology that's been created, or mythiopy, is in some ways it's altruistic because no one has used these parallel planes in the same way. Usually, it's alternate realities where you see duplicates of yourself, like a Sliders reality. But Spectral Shift is so much fun because it's these other worlds that exist just on the peripheral of our own. I have to say that the only side part of that drags me off is I get these ideas for all the ways we can apply this, and I've been starting all these little short stories, which are flowing me up from the novel. But that's been the main thing going on. That's going to be the big launch going on after Christmas. Between now and then, of course, we have several Tales from the Canyons of the Damned coming out, and you yourself are in some upcoming issues, and I thank all the readers and listeners for their support. We've had a lot of fun with that project. That project is something from the hearts of the authors. It's definitely something that we've kind of worked on in the garage and we've managed to put out a better issue each month, and our readership grows exponentially. It's one of these things that I've done in my life that I'm in awe of and impressed of, because it's larger than myself, and that the response is just incredible.
Well, in the last couple of years, you've really made a name for yourself and really made an impression in the industry as a publisher. Not only as writer, but you conceived of the Tales from the Canyons of the Damned, and you have really established this thing as a solid product that comes out every month, and all the love and the work and the care that goes into it. And now the second anthology with Oceans, but I initially knew you as a novelist, and I think I kind of kidded you several times, like, Daniel, when are you going to write another novel? Because I'm, this is what I would like to see as a reader, from you. And it makes my heart happy to see that, that you have more big stuff coming out.
And I do. You're going to see another 2 novels coming out within the next 6 months. They're in the oven baking, if you will. And I'm really excited to share those.
And
with
this
readers.
is one thing that I've learned about you, is that right when you think that Daniel is not doing something, then he drops 10 somethings on you that you had no idea he was working on. You're like, what the heck? Where'd that come from? And you're like, oh, I've been biding my time over here collecting things to shock the world with. Yeah.
Well, I think that's an important thing. You've had me on the show several times, and we've talked about the first ideas of writing, and followed your methodology. But an important thing to keep in mind, and I think Rysa will agree with this as well, is this isn't a sprint. This is a marathon. Writing is a lifestyle, and you can't always have those big projects that you love. Sometimes, with family and the balance of life, you have shorter amounts of time to put to your craft. But it doesn't mean you don't put anything in there. There's all different ways to express these demons or angels or whatever you want to call them.
Sometimes both. Yeah. Rysa, you originally were on the show. We were talking about your time travel series, and your book Time Bound is one of my all-time favorite time travel stories. And I love your world building and just your way of presenting characters, and I just love everything that you do. You recently had a story in the supervillain anthology. I think I had one in there as well, World Domination. So that's fun. What's going on with you lately?
Actually, it was the foreword.
Oh, that's
for the
right.
Supervillains
That's right.
That I wrote. I had thought about writing a story for that, and I had so many other things that I had committed to that the most I could promise was to write the foreword. But that was kind of interesting, because I was writing it and reminiscing about growing up, enjoying the villains on Batman, and then I found out that Adam West had died that same night, and so it was kind of a bittersweet situation there, because I would run home from school just to get there in time. I didn't want to miss a minute of Batman, and it was mostly the villains, to be honest. I mean, there's only so much you can do with a straight arrow type good guy. As far as what I'm doing right now, a lot of what I've been doing has been recovering. I just got back from a trip to China where they're launching the Chronos Files series, and the first book, Time Bound, was just published there. And that was a very interesting trip. We landed right in the middle of the month where the government doesn't let them see any Western movies. So having a Westerner there of any sort, they were over the top. So we had crowds everywhere we went, and that was kind of new for me. And then I've got a book coming out in October, which is the second book in the Delphi series, the X-Files meets the X-Men type of series that I've got going. Currently working on the third book in that series. And then I will be launching another time travel series to follow up on the Chronos Files. So I've kind of got multiple things I'm juggling in my head right now. And Comic-Con coming up. That's right. I'm on a panel at New York Comic-Con in about 3 weeks.
What's the panel?
It's talking about when real life mirrors fiction too closely, which is something I can definitely identify with my Delphi series. It's about conspiracy theories and a political candidate who is definitely a villain. And and so writing the
Rysa, could you be more specific?
Last year,
could you be more specific, Rysa? No,
yes.
I'm teasing.
So it was really a challenge writing the second book because I kept having to ratchet up the level of conflict.
The level of crazy.
So I think several other writers on the panel have had similar situations, and it's one of the risks of writing near future.
Right.
I mean, I think even more so than the latest iPad doesn't have the features that you described it having or whatever. Is that something fundamental can change? I had an academic friend who built his career around the Soviet Union and woke up one morning and there wasn't a Soviet Union anymore. So these things happen. But I'm looking forward to the panel and being in New York and getting to hang out with some of my writer friends. And Daniel's leaving. He's not even going to be there.
It's true. It's true. Rysa and I have had planned meetings a couple years in a row, and something has gone awry each year. And I heard she was coming to Comic-Con, and well, fortunately for my family, but unfortunately for us meeting up, we're going to Disney World.
Oh,
that
nice.
weekend. So.
Well, look, I was at Dragon Con a couple of weeks ago, and there were a couple of people there, listeners to the show and friends on Facebook, who were also going to be there. And we said, oh, well, we'll meet up for drinks or something. And when we got there, this was the largest level of crazy I had ever experienced in my life. And we couldn't have met up with people if we'd have wanted to. It was just insane. Absolutely insane. So yeah, I kind of get it. I understand that. But,
Can I ask Rysa a question? Did you say that you have a new time travel series coming out?
I did say that.
It is currently in the works, and actually the short story that is in Oceans is kind of a sneak peek in that direction. I don't know whether you'd call it a sequel series or a prequel series, because with time travel, it's actually both.
Or is it a...
Are we doing this here first? Is this something?
Is this an author story scoop?
This is sort of an author story scoop. I've told a few of my beta readers that I'm planning it, and I think I have broadly stated that I do want to go back and revisit the Chronos universe, and I had several ideas about doing it, but it was only when I started working on actually two short stories. This short story Full Circle that's in the Oceans anthology, and also one called The Circle That Winds that's coming up in Tales of
the Apocalypse.
Yeah, well, it's the second. It's the follow. Yeah. And that the two stories are slightly connected, and they both give a hint as to where we're going to be going next with Chronos. And I'll be talking more with my editor about this. This isn't official yet, but it's one of those projects that, I mean, to be realistic, if it's not something that my publisher's interested in, I probably would spin it off and do it indie. Oh, and I forgot, I've actually got a co-authored series that I'm working on as well that is a follow-up to Delphi. So hopefully I'll have maybe 3 books coming out in the next 2 years. If all goes
Rysa,
well.
I'm concerned that you're slacking off a little bit, and that you, that you're down on your game. So we may have to stage an intervention.
As long as it's red wine and coffee.
That's right. That's right.
Well, readers that are picking up Oceans today are going to love Full Circle. I'm a big fan, right? So you know that. And apart from being your friend, I do love your stories. And I don't want to give away any spoilers, but coming on the tail of the crazy weather happenings that we've had, and the United States. I don't know how to say it without a spoiler, but fans are really going to love Full Circle. It's a really great story.
Well, it's not a spoiler for anybody who has followed the Chronos series at all, because there is and that was one reason I love the topic whenever you mentioned the Oceans Anthology is there is a strip of land that basically is central to the Cyrus, the villain group in my series, and it at certain times is potentially underwater as a result of climate change. And one of the characters actually had in real life had his tomb blown out to sea by a hurricane. So it was the perfect setting for this topic. And so I was just excited when you mentioned that that was what you wanted this anthology to be about.
Well, it's a great story. I have to say, I can't wait for readers to get a hold of it, and I'm looking forward to reading your story in Tales, 'cause I also have a story in there. Yes.
Well, you'll be able to find out why the character came across the Chronos key when you read the story in Tales. So they're connected. They go full circle, if you want to put it that way.
I think editor friend of ours, Chris Porteau, sent a copy to us already. I'm gonna have to look for it.
Yeah, he did. He sent it Friday. I think I haven't sent it to my Kindle yet, but I'm going to do that today. Daniel, I want to get into the genesis of Oceans in just a second, but before I forget, I want to ask Rysa this question. We have, the internet and indie publishing and, the platform that Amazon gives us and all of that has really, made the world smaller. And I think all three of us can name, I know on, right off the top of my head, I could name, a handful or two of international readers, that consistently read everything that just about all of us put out and leave reviews. And some of them are in Germany and Ireland and England. And it's really made the world very small and, has bridged, cultural gaps and all kinds of things. Most of those people that I can name are English speaking people though. And, but you just recently went to China, where your books are there. What is it like, knowing that your work is going to another part of the world, where it has to be translated, and we're talking completely different cultures, and that sort of thing. What is that experience like?
It was fascinating, and this is, I think, 14 languages that at least one book of the Chronos series has been translated into. So I've gotten to the point where I just basically have to let it go. Because the only hint that you have at all as to whether or not the translation was good is, if sales are good in that country, and even then the translation could be incredible and the topic might just not resonate. But I was fascinated with the whole process in China because there are, as you noted, a number of cultural differences. And I was a little curious as to how the overall story of the Chronos universe would carry. But there are several things within the Chronos and my villains that really resonate with the Chinese people. And they also have a fascination with Westerners. I was surprised at how much they knew, the people that I spoke with knew about Western sci-fi, and actually how much they read Western sci-fi. And it's not as closed in that regard as I really thought that it would be. And also Chinese science fiction is really, really pushing the boundaries.
It's really hot right now.
And they are pushing the boundaries of things that generally you might not talk about in terms of politics within China, but it's okay to broach it through science fiction. So in some ways it's similar. It reminded me of Star Trek in the 1960s and how they were able to kind of push the envelope on the Vietnam War when other series got in trouble about doing that because they cloaked it, and racial tensions as well, because they cloaked it in the notion that this is happening in the future and this doesn't have anything to do with our politics. But I think in terms of Chinese science fiction, some of it is much more direct than that. So it was a fascinating trip. And one thing that I learned is, other than foods, some of which were very, very different, and I eat a lot of what I consider Chinese food. Other than that, the differences were nowhere near what I imagined they would be. And we had wonderful experiences with our publishers or with my publisher, and with just the people that I met. And they love books in China. I mean, I had people coming up with, a stack of 5 copies of Time Bound to get it signed. And you don't see that in the U.S. You just don't.
Cool. Well, the sign of a great writer is that you can tell engaging human stories that resonate with people, no matter where they come from, no matter what their political baggage or any of that stuff, and no matter the window dressing of culture. When you tell a story that's engaging human characters and situations and themes that we all can relate to, that's when you've done your job. Which brings us to Oceans, Daniel, because, fiction really opens the door to allow us to talk about things like Rysa said, that, sometimes we don't want to talk about because, we all may approach things differently, or maybe, we're kind of set in our narrow view, and fiction allows us to really explore those things. So first off, where did the idea for Oceans come from?
Well, the idea of the series originally came from a nonfiction book from when I was in university 1,000 years ago, and it was
a literal 1,000 years ago.
It was 1,000 years ago, and back in that millennia, there was this book about the Great Society, and the Great Society was an anthology, a nonfiction anthology, with authors from Orwell to Chairman Mao, several entities throughout the last few centuries, all of them depicting what they believed to be the Great Society. And of course, no two are the same, and each one of them, from their perspective, is very valid. And I have to say, it's one of my favorite nonfiction anthologies in my collection. So when I first was thinking about doing Clones, the idea was that Clones would be the first of 3 books on sociology and society and how we live and interact with each other. And Clones, which Rysa and you were both part of, as you know, was a fantastic success. It was thematic in the idea of not necessarily the same, right? And there were several different stories that came in from different authors. And I wanted to realize that in a new edition. But, a couple things happened along the road. Even though Clones was a great success, our partners at Amazon have adjusted their terms of service that make it a bit more challenging to do an anthology. So really challenging. So I was hesitant in putting out the next book in the Clones thing. What ended up happening is, with the new administration stepping in, and the president saying he was going to step away from the Paris Accords, it excited some of the authors that had been in Clones, and they reached out to me, trying to be very neutral in this, but this is how it happened. They reached out to me, particularly our friend Michael Hicks, and they said, Daniel, we have to do this. We have to talk about oceans, and of course he was really pursuing climate fiction.
Now I can't really imagine Michael Hicks getting upset about anything. We love you, Michael.
Yes, shout out to Michael. He's a very passionate, talented man. So I would have to say that Michael was the author that pushed me to commit. I've been tossing it around, and he pushed me to commit to this new theme, and there aren't a lot of ocean-themed anthologies. They do exist, but I wanted something that would be kind of original and a new way for us to talk about society. And I think this has been a huge success. I'm excited when readers look at the roster and read the stories, because it isn't. There are climate fiction stories in there, but it isn't just cli-fi. There's also some futuristic stories. There's some retro historical, I guess, alt history stories. There's some really valiant takes on the theme, but that's what brought us here, is from society of clones now to oceans. The goal is of all these books is I want readers to enjoy the stories. I want readers to learn about writers' perspectives that they may not have been exposed to in the past. And the big thing is I'm looking to provoke some thought and ideally some interaction with readers.
Well, I love that if you put a dozen writers in a room and you give them a very simple theme and you say write a story about oceans, you will get 12 very different views on the idea of oceans. And I love seeing first when you kind of created the group and you kind of put us all together and said, here are the folks writing. I was really excited to see what everyone would come up with. And then as I've read through the advanced author copy that I got, I was not disappointed in the breadth and the width of subject matter. And I love seeing that, when you told me, I had a very specific image in my mind of a story that I wanted to tell, and I knew it would not be something that Rysa would come up with, or Nathan Beecham, or, Elliot Brandis, or, Pav, or anybody. And I just love seeing creative people go nuts on a very simple theme. It's really magical.
Interesting enough, I don't know if you read Will Swordstrom's story at Aquagenic. It parallels. So you both have very similar themes, but it's told in different ways. So you two have the stories that discuss a return to the sea, but told in a very different way. And I was very, very pleased to have those incorporated into the book.
Love it. When you announced these themes to the individual writers, what were some of the responses that you got?
Oh, everybody wanted to be involved. The first thing we did is we went to everybody that was involved in clones and said, hey, you have an opportunity to submit for this collection. Unfortunately, our good friend Sam Peralta, who also worked with me in the Dominion Rising project, he has a few of his own anthologies he's putting out very soon. Never heard of them. Including, I think he's working with Chris Berteau on the
Tales of the Apocalypse.
And Tales of Apocalypse that we're involved in. So he wasn't able to participate. Neither was Sue Quinn. So Susan K. Quinn wrote an excellent story in Clones called Awakening. It was one of the more popular stories. She was very excited as well about the topic, but she has a lot going on. Very busy, very busy. So that left us some openings. So we have a dozen writers, which is more than I would really care to have. I have to say. But so then what happened is I had some openings, and I went to Ken Liu, prompted on. So Rysa and I both had stories in one of Sam's anthologies, which was the Doomsday Chronicles, I believe that was, that Ken was also in. So I had interaction with him at that time. And I was listening to an Author Stories podcast with Ken, and I was like, gosh, he's just a really nice guy.
Oh, yeah.
So I sent him an email. I said, Ken, we're doing this, and we have some openings. Sam can't be in it, and Sue is. And he's like, I'm in. And then he introduced me to Alex Shvartsman, who puts together a premier collection of anthologies called UFO, Unidentified Funny Objects. which have involved Ken and George R. Martin, and I believe David Gerard's written in there as well, who's a top Star Trek writer and a great sci-fi hero of mine. And so Alex became involved, and then Caroline Yoakum, who has won awards for short stories. She does not have a novel that I'm aware of, but she's written for Lightspeed several times, and some other magazines that we've all worked with. So, you know, when you're giving these introductions, it's so hard to pick and choose, you know, who to be involved when they all say we love this topic. So it was easier just to expand the roster.
Yeah. For sure. Rysa, you are known for your novels. You have also written short fiction in your novel universe. But what is it, how is it different writing for a themed anthology when you're kind of given a commission, so to speak? What is that experience like for you, and do you approach it differently than you do the stuff that you do for Rysa?
Not really, because definitely with the Oceans and the Clones anthology, both of those are also Chronos stories. And that's one thing about writing time travel. It's broad enough that it can cover pretty much anything. You wouldn't necessarily think that it would clones, but within the Chronos world, when they cross their own timeline, they produce something called a splinter, a temporary clone of themselves. So there was a story there that I had wanted to tell that I didn't have room to tell in the Chronos novels. And in this case, I was really looking for a good way to introduce where I'm going next with the Chronos stories. And another thing with some of the anthologies I've written in, there are always these little snippets of ideas that you have as you're writing the books, and finding ways to get those out to readers who enjoy time travel but might not necessarily have followed me to the Delphi series, which I'm having a blast writing, but like I said, it's complicated, and some people are on board for the time travel and not necessarily on board for other types of fiction. And so having opportunities where I can toss out a Chronos story to kind of keep them interested in that world while I'm waiting to write the next one. Because after I wrote Times Divide, the last book in the Chronos series, my brain did need a break from full-length time travel books. It was very much a twisted mass of spaghetti at that point, and I needed to move on and write something different. But I think I've had enough of a break now that I can start, getting back into that. And the short stories have helped me do that.
Hank, I want to interject and say, because your podcast is also a craft podcast, that when Rysa said, these little tidbits of ideas, it isn't just a little splinter, if you will, to use the title of the clone story, off of the main book series she's written. Her stories are an excellent case study of an author experimenting with new ways to tell story. With Splinter, she changed the POV from her original series to one of the favorite characters that did not have as much of a POV. But then also she wrote it in a very fast rhythm, I want to say. If you remember the story, Hank, it was different than. I mean, it wasn't so different that you didn't know that it was a Rysa Walker story, but there was a beat there. Like when you're reading it, you're like tapping your knee as you're going.
That was a fun story to write. That was so quickly.
Yeah, there's a certain cadence.
Yes, and it's a fun story to read. But what I want to show here or illustrate is that these are the types of things that authors bring to the table. Not just a one-off story or did I ever tell you this part of what happened behind the scenes, but experimenting in whole different ways to tell the story. And then with Full Circle in Oceans, it's another type of story altogether.
Daniel, you talked about feeling that Oceans was an important book to put out, and having the conversation with Michael, and that it was something that you felt, passionate about doing. And I know that you expected to get stories that had something to say about what was going on in the world now, and then you get stories like mine that are maybe a little more obscure and a little more in the headspace and not necessarily boots on the ground of what's going on in the world right now. What did you, when the story started coming in, did you feel like that you got the kind of take that you were wanting to get, and do you feel like the authors said what was important to say in this day and time?
Well, I would like to say that I would have loved to have had openings for 20 authors because we, with all the perspectives that came in, there's always room for more. I would disagree with you, Hank, that I think your story tells us just about as much of what's going on as any other. It isn't as specific to climate, but it is very specific to our culture and how we deal with people, particularly, not to give away any spoilers, but how we deal with people that are a little bit different in how they take in their surroundings. And that's one of the reasons why I loved your story. I did receive a few stories that at one point in the story, they borderlined a little bit on, preachy, I guess is a word. Okay. and I worked with those authors, or Jessica West, the great editor of the collection, who I haven't mentioned as of yet, so I hope I don't get struck by lightning. But she worked with the authors to say, hey, it's important to get your message across, but the old show don't tell. Make sure that if you're relaying this point, that you're not taking readers out of your story, and I think we accomplished that in the revisions. But different people have different experiences with the sea. I grew up with an inland sea. I grew up on Lake Huron. Now, to give you an idea of how big Lake Huron is, you can take the entire country of England and put it inside of Lake Huron. And in my adult life, I've seen that water fall. I mean, the depth has actually gone down like 10 feet because the fresh water has gone up into the atmosphere. And all of us have experienced over the last month what happens when all that water goes in the atmosphere.
Yeah.
And lives have been changed. And I'm a firm believer in my own philosophy to just go out and raise your fists isn't as strong as illustrating a story to someone and letting them experience your point.
Well, that was kind of the answer that I thought you would give, and that I was kind of goading you into.
It took too long to do that. That's what I was getting.
Well, I, because I'm kind of like you. I tell people all the time, I don't care to talk about politics or religion or belief much at all on platforms like Facebook, because I don't think that does anything there. Now, if you want to come to my house and let's eat dinner together, I'll tell you everything I believe about everything, and we'll have a real legitimate conversation, and we will, hash it out. And maybe at the end of it, one or both of us will leave thinking a little bit differently than when we came in. That's kind of the hope.
I'm gonna have to disagree.
Okay, please.
There. And I think it's a difference from a female perspective coming in than it is from a male perspective, because
I expect that.
I have a lot of readers, and I am political in my social platforms, partly because I taught political science and history online, and it is part of who I am. It is. I could not be political. I tried for a little while and failed miserably. So I finally just said, the hell with it. If they read my Chronos series and they don't know where I stand, they didn't read it very carefully. So I just, threw caution to the wind at that point. But I think that there are people who need that sense of community And sometimes, especially if they're in an isolated area where the people around them don't necessarily share their views, being able to come into a social media platform and sometimes having an author who thinks the way you think gives you a certain sense of belonging. It gives you a certain sense of community that you would not have otherwise. I mean, I certainly have authors that I follow who disagree with my views, but I have probably a lot more that I follow that do agree with me on some issues. I mean, not on every issue. And there are problems with being too vocal online, but if you can bring something to the conversation, and I think my background, I mean, teaching political science for several decades, I can come in and go, I'm sorry, but that's what you're reading. That's not how the system works. Here's how it actually works. And it has distracted me to some extent from getting my fiction written. And I wish that the distraction was not there, but it is what it is. And at some point, maybe it's waving fist, and maybe it's slacktivism, as some of actually my son has been known to call it that. But it's what I can contribute, and I know a lot of other writers who feel that way.
Rysa, I have to say that I'm behind you 200%. I follow you on social media. We're social media friends, and not only do I respect, but I align with your thinking. But I think one of the reasons I would have said female, I respect that. I would have thought that that you're at a different point in your career than some other writers. That if people don't know, like you said, what you think by now, So I think
they weren't paying attention.
Yeah. So I think that at the point in your career, I would say that you probably have a responsibility, and I'd also say that you have a lot of class. You aren't out there just throwing stones or burning bridges. I love.
I do that in the private group.
That's fine. But a pat on the back is your thoughts of the day, and I respect that a lot. I agree with them a lot personally. I think where Hank was coming from, and what my target is with Oceans is, I don't need to convert the people that agree with me. I want people that I would rather have people that are unaware of how the world is being affected by climate change read Oceans than from the political standpoint. I'd rather have them have their hands on it than the people that already agree with us, because this is a way for them, through experiencing these stories, to say, wow, I wasn't aware that there are so many dead zones. The story R.D. Brady, who's was also in Clones, and she has the great series, the Belial series. She uses her story to illustrate the number of dead zones. And Joshua Ingle, who's a younger writer, he was kind of one of the I tapped a new writer for Clones, and I appreciate him so much. I brought him back, but he has put some statistics in there. We had to dial it back a little bit because there was a lot of information. But this is the stuff that I would really want the people that aren't aware to see this. So I think these are kind of two different things. There's definitely. I mean, I'm not going to deny where I'm at. That slacktivist is something I don't think I've heard that before. Maybe that's me. I think
the point that I was making in terms of when I said female, one reason that I was broaching it from that direction is there has been a lot in the current climate where women, and including myself, I have been told by a number of people online that I basically should just shut up and write fiction, and I will not do that.
I've never.
And that's more. And I don't think men get that as often. They do occasionally, but I think it has just been. It's something that I felt I had to stand up against because.
Well, rest assured, men get that too.
And let me just be clear. I'm not saying that authors should not share their views. I'm not saying that at all. I think that if you, but what the point I was trying to make is that is that a lot of times social media, these discussions devolve into just stone throwing, and we get to the point where people just become more solidified in their own views instead of softening up a little bit and hearing what the other person has to say. But when you coach those things in story, and like Daniel was saying about RD's story about dead zones and things like that, you make it much more palatable. And then when someone comes away from the story, they don't even know it, but their mind has begun to change. And that's a powerful, powerful tool, that writers are given, a gift, a tool, whatever you want to call it. But the ability to change the way someone thinks about something, in a very tangible way is kind of magical. And, it allows us to tackle tough subjects, and not make enemies in the process. So, I love that part about it.
So when Clones was conceived, we knew that there were hurricanes and these things have happened over the last few years. We had no idea that we'd have the August and September that we'd have. I mean, these stories were all turned in before that.
And new storms coming.
And they're coming, yes, unfortunately. And even though the administration, one of the inspirations I said was that the administration had turned away from the Paris Accords, and now with these storms, the administration is having another look at these things. It cannot be denied that we need to be on board with the planet, and that's again, I don't want to get preachy. I can let Rysa do that for me, but I do think it's great. Without having, what was the great climate fiction movie that was the one where we had like all the hurricanes and everything happened at once and New York froze
Day After
over.
Tomorrow or something like that.
Yeah. I went and saw that. I remember with a British friend of mine, and we were at the Ziegfeld Theater, which is they've closed it down. But it's this giant theater, one of the last in New York, and we were laughing pretty hard at what was going on, which we shouldn't have been. But there are extremes to say, oh, and if we don't do this, the world will freeze, and we're going to be living under ice.
Yeah.
And, maybe that'll happen, maybe it won't. But there's subtler things that really will make a difference. If Key West disappears. So
yeah, for sure. Daniel, with the release of Oceans today coming out, and a phenomenal follow up to Clones, where do you see the Frontiers of Speculative Fiction going next?
Well, there was an outline, as I said, to follow societal interaction. I think these are great themes to give to authors to play with, and they're a little bit out of on the fringe, on the fringes. So I do have a couple of other ideas to put out there, but the bottom line is I'm looking at our partnership with Amazon, and we're going to see how this works out. Putting together a strong anthology with a strong roster is a financial endeavor as well as a artistic endeavor, and these things have to work. So that's kind of where we're at. I mean, that's a reality of indie publishing is still publishing, and we've talked about this before on your show. It's still a business. All of us would probably do this for free anyways, because we love to write and we're going to write. But in order to get stuff out to the readers, there needs to be a readership. So we're going to see how well Oceans does. And because of the way the book was put out, we're not doing the Kindle Unlimited with our Amazon partner. We're going what us writers like to call wide. We're making it available in all of the vendor stores. So as of today, if you're an iBooks reader, you can go to your iTunes. If you're a Kobo reader outside the United States, there's where they mostly are. You can go there. Nook as well. Even on Google Play, a few people like to read their books on Google. We're there. So we're just going to kind of see how that goes. But I think it would be great to have a a few other anthologies there, like like City, the anthology, or Space, the anthology, and not Space the way that we do these wonderful Pew Pew, which I love, by the way. I love the Pew Pew books, but different ways to look at how we interact with what's the world that's happening around us.
Would you like to speak just briefly about kind of the state of publishing? You kind of mentioned that there's some things that have happened with Amazon and the way they treat anthologies and things like that. And we've talked before about that. This is really a golden age of the resurgence of the anthology, and it really has become an art form of its own, or not just become, but has a real resurgence of it because of some of the mechanisms that Amazon have given publishers. What do you think is going to happen with publishing in the near future, and do you see the demise of the Kindle revolution, or is this just another evolution of the revolution?
Well, I would say it's evolution. I think that some of the recent terms of service that Amazon has put out is actually counterproductive to the utilization of the Kindle. I like KU, the KU program. I'm a member of the KU program. I'm an avid reader. It's been said that writers are just super readers, if you will, readers that do more.
We write what we can't find on the shelves.
Exactly. So the idea of anthologies are what brought me into fiction. I remember on the school bus when I was so young, just reading all these short stories, reading the Bradbury short stories, reading all the science fiction, all these great little gems.
Same.
Yes, almost all the authors, and the tradition there is, and I take it more with Tales from the Caves of the Damned and the Frontiers of Speculative Fiction, is the predecessors, the ancestral rights of Tales from the Caves of the Damned are amazing stories, are fantastic stories. Those publications stay in print. They put out two stories of reprint and then two original stories, and the reprint stories were either public domain or authors bringing them in. So the public domain authors, of course, in the first part of the 20th century were Edgar Allan Poe. They were the father, one could argue, of speculative and science fiction, Jules Verne. And so these stories, you're always looking for the B-side, if you will, of a Poe or a Jules Verne. But these stories were put into a collection to add value to the reader, and then also to, save some pay for original work. By striking the reprint possibility within an anthology, that means you can only have original work, which is great. Yep. But it's not a viable business. It's just not.
No, I completely agree. And I mean, my publisher is Amazon Publishing, but I think that's a mistake, and it hurts authors. It hurts people who are actually trying to put together these anthologies. And I understand their perspective that, the whole notion of the reader experience and being sure that, everything that they get is something new and that they're not paying for the same thing twice. And I could get that if you're paying, $9.99 or more for an anthology, you might want that kind of a guarantee, but that's generally not the situation. And there's so much new content in these anthologies, and it makes it difficult for both sides of the equation. So I really wish they would revisit that, but you know how that goes.
Well, there's a strong business case to allowing it, and I'll look at it from two sides. One side is that with the short fiction revolution that has been enabled through small press publishing, through e-readership, people such as Alex Shvartsman that I mentioned already, and then with Samuel Peralta's Future Chronicles, which were a huge inspiration for me. We're bringing a lot of new writers into short fiction and opening up their readership, but then we're also bringing in writers that are more popular, again, to expand their readership, but to give them an opportunity to step away from their novel contracts and to have fun in the sandbox with the rest of us, which they love, which is great.
Exactly.
So on the new writer side, or I shouldn't even say new writer, because many of these writers have been writing for decades. They're just now finally getting some exposure. It's great if they can write a story that's exclusive through a contract for 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, whatever it is, with an anthology, and then have the ability to put their story as a separate publisher, which is themselves, of course, into KU. Because what happens is if a reader picks them up, and, hey, I like this story. Oh, this was in a anthology. I'll go read the anthology. Now I'm learning about somebody else's work, or that's how fandom is created. And I really feel that these current terms of service are very short-sighted on that fandom.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I agree.
Rysa, what's coming up next from you?
Next is the Delphi Resistance, which is the second book in the Delphi Trilogy, and that, I believe it's the 24th of October when that will hit the shelves. And then after that, I'll be writing the third book in the series. That's due in January, so not much downtime.
Right. Daniel, the anthology comes out today. We're going to send everybody to go get it. You mentioned that the ebook Spectral Shift will be launching separately soon. What can we look forward to from you in the near future?
Well, in just a few days, we're going to be releasing the Halloween issue for Tales from the Canyons of the Damned, and this is going to be a fantastic issue. I love these opportunities to get on the soapbox, but I would love for the readers to get a hold of this. We have a great story from Peter Codron, who just a couple weeks ago released his first trade novel, Retrograde. So he's now one of in my favorite club, which is the hybrid author. I love the hybrid author. And so he has a great story this month, as well as a story that I asked Kevin Lauderdale to sit on for a year. For a year. He submitted it last year for the Halloween issue, but we were out of pages, and it's a great story. He feels it's the strongest story yet, and it's for those who haven't read Kevin Lauderdale, he has an ability to write these satirical, they aren't horror stories, but they're fun. They're fun, and I love to include them in the canyons because we do lean a little bit more towards horror than just the dark sci-fi. So to have a satire in there, it brings it some levity. People are really going to enjoy that. Another great story is Christopher Vallon has. I don't want to give away spoilers, but the point being, in a couple days we're going to have the Halloween issue out. November we're going to have the space issue out with Rhett Bruno, and we also have Eamon Ambrose is signed on for a story, and then a couple other surprises coming up, and then I tell you, we're booked for the next 3 months with Tales from the Canyons of the Damned. People are going to be excited to see these stories. It's a great part of the job. I have to say, early on, one of the fun things about being an anthologist, and Sam Peralta warned me, don't be so much of an anthologist that people think you're that way, especially if you're a novelist. But the fun thing is I get all these stories first. I get them first. Except for beta readers, nobody's seen this stuff yet. So it's it's kind of neat. It's my little fanboy gets excited every time one of my friends says, "Hey, do you have room in your little book for this?" I'm like, "Oh yes, send it." So
I love it. Daniel, who did this gorgeous cover for the book?
Oh, the covers are done by Ben Adams. He's been working with us for, he went back to Hugh How He Lives, and so I brought him in for Clones, and then he provided another new cover for Oceans the Anthology. We're really excited about it.
And if you go to that series page, you can see these two gorgeous covers side by side. They're really phenomenal. Well, Daniel and Rysa, thanks so much for taking time out of a Sunday afternoon and peeling yourself away from family and football and all of that good stuff. We're going to send everybody to go pick up a copy of Oceans. And you know what? While you're there, you might as well pick up a copy of Clones so that you can really get the full experience of what this series is about. Daniel and Rysa, thanks so much for taking time to come on the show.
Thank you. Class.
Thanks for listening to the Author Stories podcast. For more great author interviews like this one, go to hankgarner.com and dig through the archives. There's something there I know you'll love. Tune in for new episodes every Tuesday and Friday. Now stay tuned for a special audio clip from Richard Gleaves' The Jason Crane series.
Joey had never attended a game before. He'd sung at some pep rallies, and his band, Hollow Praise, had performed at the Spirit Dance and at other horseman-related gigs. But he'd always felt unreasonably unwelcome in the straight jock universe, so he'd avoided any actual sports. Nate called down to Zeph from the stands. Zeph and Joey climbed up and joined Nate and Sally Blatt, the red-headed star trombonist of the school orchestra and band. The great diva received them with weary indulgence and sat blowing scales on her white trombone, like a pufferfish making out with a length of PVC pipe. The cheerleaders assembled on the running track and began their routine. Boom, dynamite! We're dynamite! Tick, 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 tick! We're dynamite! Let's go, Hollow, let's go! Let's go, Hollow, let's go! Let's get a little bit rowdy, R-O-W-D-Y. The band blew flourishes as the flatbed homecoming float drove by. Joey was fascinated by the rituals. Parents escorted the players to the field. The crowd bowed with solemnity as the announcers read a list of alumni who had passed on. It was meaningful. Joey hadn't expected it to be. He wondered what other high school experiences he'd missed for fear of not fitting in. Joey! Someone called. He scanned the crowd and saw Erica Davis below, leaning over the chain link and waving. Erica was an alto from Joey's choir. Can you sing? She said. Her voice was unnaturally rough and plummy, even for a member of the low E-flat club. I'm kind of on a date. I saw. Oh my God, you two are so cute, and I am totally on board with your diversity, but I need a favor. I promised to sing the anthem, but... She tapped her throat. Mono. But we're calling it Flu, okay? Can you sub in for me? Okay. Fine. When? Now! She grabbed Joey's elbow, guided him to a gap in the chain link, and pulled him across the running track and onto the field. The sounds of the crowd faded behind them as they crossed the grass. Joey's brain began racing. What were the words to the national anthem again? Please rise for the Stars and Stripes, said an announcer, and, as one, Sleepy Hollow High School quieted, stood, and laid hands and ball caps to their hearts. Oh, say, can you see? His voice cracked, and not a small crack either. It broke down the middle like the Titanic and killed all the Irish down in steerage. He looked for Zeph, who stood with his hand to his heart, urging Joey on with his eyes. Joey put a hand to his own heart and began again, reaching deep. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light? His voice was rough, but it gained confidence as he sang. It bounced back at him from the distant speakers, slightly out of sync. But he sounded good. In fact, he sounded great. Tears of relief welled in his eyes, of relief and something else he couldn't explain. There was real beauty in this moment. A pool of light, a patchwork of windbreakers and balloons and solemn, glowing faces. The town of Sleepy Hollow glittering down below. The anthem echoed off the hills. He found the word free and lifted it to the stars. The crowd cheered. He held the note as long as he could. And the